What's up, everybody? I'm finally back for a new video, and I think this is going to be a pretty fun one because I kind of tried to recreate a track by the Cab Drivers in order to just pick up some different techniques and figure out some things and create better house music. So this is going to be about anything ranging from mixing to some music theory, some arrangement and stuff like this. Yeah, so let's jump right in and take a look at this kick drum. So my finding number one is that some kick drums can have some pretty cool distortion on there, and I don't know what's on this thing, but it sounds pretty cool. And I tried to recreate it from a 909, adding a bunch of different saturation plugins and stuff like this, but I'm not getting there. So I'm back to sampling kick drums, which is just for me like in a realization that sometimes at this point I just can't create a kick drum like this by myself, so I'm gonna sample it if I can find something cool. And if you look at the waveform of this kick, you can see how it has this particular type of saturation with these crazy edges, and if you just use a normal saturator or something, it just kind of chops off the top. And yeah, I tried a Decapitator by Sound Toys, which brought me somewhere closer to this, and I could see in an oscilloscope that this distortion type looks kind of similar, but yeah, that's basically it. And rhythm-wise, just a normal 4 to the floor. Then it has this extra hit, which is much quieter and has a little bit of swing on there, which is just dum. And also later on, once the bass line comes in, you will see how this kind of works nicely with the bass line. Yeah, let's look at the drums a little bit more. Something else that I found very interesting is they have this closed head pattern. And you have this shorter head in there. So this is just a 909 closed head. And if you have your simpler sampler and just put it in classic mode, like with a little bit of release, you can kind of control the length of your notes, obviously, with your MIDI notes over here. And in the arrangement, they have some shorter notes coming up like pretty randomly, just at different points to create some accents. And what I found nice about this is that usually when I think of an accent, I want to I add more velocity or add something more. And it's super cool and smart to create some accents by removing something, because this way you actually end up having some more space and stuff and just don't always have to add more. So I found this very helpful to learn this from this track. Next up is the tambourine, which is meant to be like a cool layer. And what I liked about the tambourine in the original track is it was very subtle and sounded a bit noisy and not as sharp as other tambourines. And so what I did is add this EQ. Let's listen to this tambourine with the EQ. And this is without. So tambourines usually can be pretty sharp and have these crazy resonances. But what you can do to kind of tame them is just open up an EQ. Take a look at where you have these crazy resonant frequencies and just dip them out. And it's going to kind of take away this crazy dissonant tonal style that the tambourine usually has and kind of moves it more into the direction of a shaker or noisy head or something like this. And sometimes it's super nice to have a tambourine poking through with these resonant frequencies because it just has a different texture and separates them from the rest of the drums. But in this case, it's also cool to EQ it like that and make it less annoying. And then overall for the drums, they have just a very small drum kit that works throughout the whole track, but the elements kind of come in and go out to create some different vibes and different tensions. And basically, besides the tambourine, they have the clap. Well, actually, let's take a quick look at the clap, which is also just a 909 clap. But something that I've figured out here for myself is that some claps in some tracks have very cool reverb sounds. And it sounds more like a noisy tail that somehow happens behind the clap. And I tried out different reverbs, but I couldn't get them to sound the way I wanted to. And I realized, but some samples that I have already have this very cool old sounding tail. So I figured out that I'm going to organize my claps a bit in a way that I'm not always trying to create the reverb myself, because some of these old school sample libraries already have some pretty cool reverb on there. And in this case, I wanted to bring the reverb out even more. So a tool that everyone should have, in my opinion, is a transient shaper, because it's very nice and easy to handle dynamics with that. And I just added a bit more sustain with a specific curve to bring up this tail, basically, to make this part louder. You can also do this with a compressor, but sometimes the transient shaper is just quick and easy. And then I felt like making the clap a little bit wider, so I just found this random beautiful vintage chorus preset for FabFilter Timeless 3. Just gives it some width. Yeah, that's the clap. Let's see what we have. Clap, closed head, and tambourine. Like a marching snare. Little conga hit. Little percussion sound. And then they just add like a ride sound. And even an open 909 head. Most of these sounds are 909 sounds. Yeah, and like this you can basically have these drums come in and out. Cool. Let's move over to the bass sound. The bass is just, I kind of recreated this preset. It's a basic setup where you have a sawtooth wave going through a filter and just like adjust the filter envelope and the amp envelope and add some feedback and then mess around with it. Kind of like a Moog bass. I have a tutorial on how to make a bass like this in more detail. I'm gonna link it in the description if you want to check it out. And then throughout the track they just add a little bit of like variation or like modulation, opening up the filters, opening up the decay time a little bit. And I basically made these macros so I don't have to open up the synthesizer every time and can just control it like that. Yeah, next up is this weird plucky sound, which is also just like a sawtooth wave with a bunch of resonance and kind of moving around like this. I don't want to get too deep into the synthesis, so with the video it doesn't end up being 3 days long. Just the filter moves and it adds some distortion and stuff and just plays this melody. But I found it funny, like I don't actually like the sound that much, but in the track it just sounded kind of cool. It works together with the bass line. Cool. Maybe music theory wise for the bass line, I'm not a music theory expert, but something that I noticed here, if you want to make a cool bouncy loopy bass line that has a short phrase like this, I think something that makes it work in this case is that you have basically an E playing as the last note, which compared to the A is basically a perfect fifth, you know? So you kind of have your fundamental note at this A, and then the last note is an E. So you're basically going from the dominant position in the scale back to the one, and that kind of closes up the deal of this loop. Cool. And up last, let's take a look at the chords, because that's actually something, yeah, I really like these chords and I wanted to figure out how they made them, kind of. Oh, kind of how they made them. So, these chords, I tried to recreate them with like different approaches. First, I was thinking of that maybe it's kind of a chord that has a delay on there, which sounds cool. So I used Echo Boy. It has a 16th note delay time, so it creates this. And delays obviously also have a filter sometimes in there, and it kind of modulates the sound over time, so it has this movement. And what I basically created or adjusted a preset in Diva, just looked through some things. I can do a breakdown of this if you guys want to, but for this video it's gonna be too long. But the chord that it's basically playing is an inversion of a C major 7th chord. So this would be the chord. If I drop this down by an octave, you can see how I have a C, an E, a G, and a B. And that makes it a C major 7th. And if I just do the second inversion of it, then you have a little bit more closed voicing, which sounds pretty cool. So you can create sounds like this with a delay, as I just demonstrated. But one problem that I had, I felt like they were playing it and then they had moments where it was just one hit and no delay coming up, and I would have to modulate the delay in order to make that happen, which for me just didn't seem that cool, and also I felt like I had a bit less control. Then I was thinking about, well, I can just create it with an envelope, so it's gonna be like basically I'm playing a rhythm like this one, which are just notes, because also on the delay option it's difficult to add swing. So I added swing to the MIDI notes, which also sounds cool, but it didn't sound exactly the way they've done it, because all the envelopes re-trigger every single time. So the filter stops up, the amp envelope starts up, and it also didn't really seem like the right approach. So what I did in the end actually is create or use a gate and just basically use this chord sound, create a rhythm. It's kind of like a sidechain trigger, where I just used a very short sound, which basically just opens up, is a trigger to open up the sidechain of the gate. And if I now have this gate here, you can see how it's getting a trigger from this gate trigger over here. So whenever one of these guys hits, the gate is opening up and letting the chord sound through. And this also gives you some options to modulate everything with the gate controls. Which is cool. And then on top of that, you have the option to kind of adjust the notes and add some extra sounds, which also happens later in the track. Yeah, this was already the chord sound. Arrangement wise, well, besides like just adding elements, adding modulation to everything, they have these drum fills. And something I liked about this track, it's very straightforward that you can check out these different parts and just figure out what they're doing there. All right, and then arrangement wise, at some points they have added all the elements from the drum kit, have removed them a few times, added some variation modulation, so they have a new element coming in, which is just a second bass. which for me also kind of creates this call and response pattern, because you have this ba-dum bum bum, and then the bass line is doing like boom boom boom, kind of. Yeah, this is already pretty much it. I know I went over some stuff quite quickly. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I can always do also follow-up videos, explain some stuff in more detail. I'm also jumping over the stuff that I've maybe covered in some other videos, so make sure to check them out. And yeah, I hope you found some of this helpful, and see you soon in the next video. Ciao, ciao.